Mossad.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Ricardo Rendes, also known as Rick Rendes, and a great episode for you today. Today we have Ryan Cristián from TheLastAmericanVagabond.com. It's an independent news website, and he also streams on YouTube and many other platforms. If you want to keep up with current events or historical events or some deep dives into some really interesting topics, definitely check out TheLastAmericanVagabond.com. He also has some amazing contributors to the website and journalists like Whitney Webb and Derek Brose. And of course, regardless where you're watching or listening to the Ripple Effect podcast, go into show description to find links to my guests and also much more, including ways to support the Ripple Effect podcast. As you know, this is a value for value show. I hope that if you get some value out of the episodes I bring to you and the guests and discussions I bring to you, that you'll try to give some value in return. And there's many different ways of doing so. You can rate, review, leave comments, and that hopefully helps the algorithms that suppress conversations and shows like these. The podcast is also open source, so feel free to post any episode you really enjoyed on whatever social media platform you might be on, or if you have a YouTube or Rumble channel, feel free to post it there. The most important thing is getting these conversations out there. It's not about me directly getting the clicks. But if you do listen to the Ripple Effect podcast on a regular basis and you're in a decent financial situation where you can afford to help financially, please consider doing so. Independent content creators like myself and Ryan from The Last American Vagabond, we invest a lot of time and effort researching topics, learning as much as we can, being open-minded in our research and conversations, hoping to bring you something of value and something that is thought-provoking. But all this thought-provoking content is also time-consuming. So show your appreciation to content creators like us, because the truth is, when shit hit the fan during COVID, it was people like Ryan and myself and other great content creators in our community that weren't afraid to speak out and hopefully prove to you guys that when it was the most difficult to do so, we had the courage to go against the grain. Now you see a lot of content creators that are talking about topics that were very taboo for a very long time, everything from vaccines to 9/11 to chemtrails. So many topics that when it was difficult to speak out and talk about, we had the courage to speak out and didn't care what people thought of us, didn't care what platform might shadow ban us or completely ban us due to these conversations. We really cared about getting the truth out at all and any cost. So hopefully you appreciate that. Hopefully you remember and appreciate that during COVID, when times were tough and a lot of people were just looking for answers or looking for someone to provide some information and evidence that we were being lied to, we were there. The Last American Vagabond was there. James Corbett and the Corbett Report was there. Jason Burmis was there. The No Agenda Show, The High Wire. So many people that were a part of the Union of the Unwanted were there, from Sam Tripoli to Charlie Robinson. And the reason I bring this all up is because I've been doing a lot of thinking about all my friends like Ryan that I've made throughout this journey, and how so many of them that I'm the closest with, I know that when the whole world goes to shit and when everything gets turned upside down and you have friendships and jobs and things on the line, there's certain people that I can count on. And hopefully, you know, you can count on this show. You can count on shows like The Last American Vagabond. And with that said, hopefully that is enough to motivate you to support shows and content creators like us. You can send a one-time donation via Venmo, PayPal. You can support us on Patreon. You can go to the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com and check out all our merch. We have a bunch of cool logos, hoodies, t-shirts. We have some Theory 6 music stuff, which is my solo music project. So go to the rippleeffectpodcast.com, click on merch, or you can go directly to the merch store by going to the Ripple Effect Podcast merch.com. Get some cool merch, get some Christmas presents, get some hoodies for the cold weather, get a cool mug, get something, and support a show that you enjoy and you appreciate. Other ways of showing your appreciation is checking out Theory 6 music. I just released 6 songs total, new songs, completely new. They're out on Pandora, iTunes, Spotify, anywhere you can download or stream music, you can find Theory 6 music. The latest song is called The Lost Theory. All the new songs will be on the new EP called Artificial Ripple, but they all have been released as singles. Stream some amazing music that is written about some of the things we talk about on the podcast, and also some of the songs are more personal. They're not political. They're not about conspiracies. They're just about internal battles and whatnot. They're very personal lyrics, and I'm combining two genres of music I've always loved, electronic music and metal and metalcore. So if that sounds like something that you might enjoy, check out Theory 6 music. Also, if you like the theme song, the music you hear in the Ripple Effect podcast, check out Theory 6. The song's called The Ripple Effect. And I think that's it. Enjoy this amazing conversation with dear friend and returning guest, Ryan Cristián from The Last American Vagabond. And I will talk to you guys in the next one. Peace. It's been a while.
It has. You know, it's funny. We get so pulled into what you're focused on. You know, like, and especially because there's so much nonsense out there today. I feel like it's almost, in a way, part of an agenda to sort of like make us like tunnel vision focus into what we can control and what we can do. You know, it's just hard because I guess my point is, like, I used to watch like James Corbett's work like religiously, and it's like I can't even find the time to read. It's like you're just so focused on the day to day, and it's like part of that's kind of a detriment, you know.
Well, it's funny you say that, because I honestly was just thinking about why I haven't like seen any of his recent work. We have so many distractions and we have so many things coming at us that it's easy to forget about somebody, a content creator, a researcher, somebody you like, because you have all these other things kind of fighting for your time and energy and focus. And then and it's funny that you bring up James Corbett, because I literally was just thinking about that, because every once in a while, if I haven't seen his work in a while, I'll just go to his website. I'll check his social media feeds, which aren't many. He is back on YouTube, but I'll just kind of check and see what he's up to. Oh, let's check out the most recent, New World Next Week, most recent documentary, whatever he's up to. And I'm kind of the same way, like him, the High Wire, I've neglected for a while. There's quite a few like go-to shows. I haven't listened to a No Agenda, I've listened to a little bit of a couple recent episodes, but I haven't had the time to really listen to a full episode. So I'm kind of on the same boat, where there's been so many distractions and so many things going on that, you forget about things, and you neglect certain things, and you get, like you said, this tunnel vision of focus on other things. And I guess, it's not always a bad thing. Like, I think sometimes if you listen to the same people over and over again, if you read the same researchers' work, if you always get like the same perspective from the same people, that eventually it kind of starts molding your perspective. And then it's nice to kind of seek out different people, different opinions, and get out of that rhythm. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think it's always good to mix it up a little bit. That's kind of the point, is that you get, if you do that and get over focused, it can definitely benefit your work too, but you can, miss the forest for the trees kind of a thing, But for me, it's more about like the video. Like James puts out articles, I'll read those, because I can run through it. But in video content, which is what I was referring, I used to say, watch the documentary, watch the, and it's just, I just find it's harder and harder to do that. But I mean, it's kind of, the point is, that's exactly what people will say about my long content. I don't have the time to watch. I get it. It's a problem with where we are today, where there's so much to be discussed at any given moment. There's so much going on. I mean, Charlie Robinson and I have been doing a pretty like monthly thing called just like what the hell is going on. Kind of the running joke is that it's just it's just insane. Like we can talk like the day before, and by the time we get ready to do the show, the whole world is turned on its head. You know, things go so rapid, and I think that's obviously by design. You know, a lot of it is now being, you know, there's a whole thing right now with Trump's administration that you know, Bannon was talking about where they call flooding the zone. You know, where the idea is basically to you know, just bomb the conversation with so much nonsense. Some things are true, but just so unimportant and so distractionary to keep people just buried with you know, like Trump will come out and say something that they know is a lie. So then people go, oh, he's a liar. He got caught in that. But they don't care. They lie every day. Over here, they're getting away with murder. You know, it's like it's not a unique to Trump thing, but it's something that's been like acknowledged as something they're discussing. That I think Bannon said we're going to flood the zone with so much shit that they won't even know what's going on. You know, it's like I think that works. You know, and you have to like people like us have to sit back and go, you know, where do I carve that? Like lately, I've been really struggling with that. You know, where is the importance? Should I be calling out these partisan people for things that they're to see? You know, is it important enough? Are there enough people falling for that it's important to break away from the factual reporting to highlight their lies? Or is it more important to ignore all of that, focus on what I can prove, but are you missing people by not doing that? You know, I'm sure you struggle with it. It's hard.
Yeah, because you have limited time and energy, so it's like you're constantly trying to figure out, okay, where should I focus that
Yeah.
time and energy? And sometimes you can get lost in something that really, I guess, if you zoom out in the scheme of things, like isn't that important? And it's like, okay, well, maybe I should have been focused more on this or that, or learning about this issue or that issue. So it does get difficult to kind of, with so many things thrown at you, to figure out like where should I put my time and energy. And like you said, it's a part of the plan, really. I mean, there's back in the day there was a book and I believe a documentary called Merchants of Doubt, and it was all about like, you know, just how. And I think there's whatever they were talking about, whatever the topic was. I know I didn't necessarily agree with them, but I liked the idea of getting people to understand that sometimes the plan is to just throw a bunch of information at you, some of it being wrong, some of it being right, but just throw so much at you that you throw your hands up and you're like, I don't know what to believe. And then you just kind of either give up or you just go with whatever the mainstream narrative is because that's the safe bet. And that does happen a lot. I mean, obviously, we saw during COVID where, you know, in my personal life, having conversations with people and they would be like, well, yeah, that sounds logical. That sounds like you're making sense. But I don't know. The news is saying this and this doctor's saying that. I don't know what to believe. So, you know, I'm just going to do it. Just, you know, play it safe. And to me, it's like, okay, well, now it's working. You're confusing people so much that their default position is just go with whatever everybody else is doing because that's much easier than going against the grain.
Yeah, they're playing the odds, you know, like, and I mean, I made this point so many times over the years, you know, that people like exactly that, right? So people get to a moment where, you know, you got one group saying one thing, one group over here saying the exact opposite. Both claim they're absolutely in the truth. You know, I can prove it. And so people I don't, it's hard to say. I'd like to think it's the minority today. I used to think it was probably the majority, but a large group of people just go, you know what? Screw it. You know, like, I don't know what to do. This is crazy. You know, and there's another group in the government going, don't even listen to any of them. Just trust what we're saying, you know? And so they just go, whatever, screw it. I'm going to go get McDonald's, go to Walmart, sit at home, you know, like just the monotonous day-to-day kind of mainstream thing. And that's what they want from people, to check out, to trust the plan, you know, just to go along with what you're being fed. I don't believe, I think right now for the first time, maybe ever in my doing this, and you tell me what you think of the last week, it's breaking down. People are, and like we all see right now, Epstein, Trump, you know, or just overlapping with other things around the administration. And it's not about Trump versus Biden. It's about the government finally being seen, even if people don't recognize that's what they're seeing, but the government as an apparatus being seen for something that is, you know, it's a manipulation. You know, like it is breaking down. My title today was the Epstein, I think it was just Epstein. What was it? Exposes the fake MAGAs. It's like, or like it's something about the two-party illusion. You know, this is showing people, especially if they follow consistently people like us that are talking about this over a long spear, you know, from Obama to today, and the consistent criticism has been the same, people are starting to see that. At least I think. I mean, what do you think? Do you think you seeing that at all? The breakdown of the two-party illusion?
Well, you know, something I did want to talk to you about was the Israel thing and how that topic has become, I mean, for a long time, you had obviously the pro-Palestine left, and then you had, a lot of the Israel support came from the right, and now there's a civil war on the right, and Israel's about to lose all their support because once enough, people, enough people wake up to the fact that like, hey, a foreign government should not have this much influence on all our politicians.
No
It's not
matter
just
what foreign government.
yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter which foreign government. I mean, I think the Charlie Kirk thing, and I'm interested into your opinions on it, but I am stunned by how not enough people in the alternative media community, people in the mainstream media community, uh, obviously they're probably there's a reason why they're not talking about it, but I'm like, this could potentially be a coup or a warning shot for all politicians and anybody who speaks out saying like, hey, we got you, by the balls, and what we say goes. And if you go against the grain, if you go against, our agenda, what we need to do or what we want to do, then there's going to be issues. And to me, I'm like, that's possibly the most concerning. I was going to say very concerning, but possibly the most concerning thing right now is the fact that people don't see that people are kind of ignoring the fact that like this is kind of a big deal because if potentially what some people think happened, which was like, it was a public execution of somebody who had huge influence of the young, college age, just generation of conservatives, then what are we saying? What happened? What did we witness? What is going on? And why does it not matter? Like you said, you always talk about the two political party illusion. There's nothing that breaks that, and that I guess defends that perspective more than the fact that no matter if you're right, left, liberal, Republican, conservative, whatever political party or ideology you might have, they're all pro-Israel. So it's like, okay, I can disagree with you on everything, but then when we talk about Israel, especially Bibi, because Bibi comes into town and everybody treats him like he's the second coming of Jesus, and which is funny because he's Jewish, so I guess that doesn't doesn't make much sense, but you get what I mean. But so and then his influence, his documentary, the Bibi Files, disappearing from the face of the earth, being banned from every every streaming platform. I believe it's just returned back to Amazon Prime. But when all this October 7th stuff happened and when he was in the news every day, he got it banned from every platform. We had people all over the world saying that when you went on these streaming services, it said that it wasn't available in your country, but yet every country was saying the same thing.
Right.
So it's like the influence that he had to do that. The fact that like Trump is a bit of a loose cannon, and even to be, and he kind of likes to be the alpha male in the room. And when Bibi's in town, he seems like he even like kneels to him.
It's not seems like, man. I mean, that's what's so crazy is you really just can't stop. People can't ignore it, right? It's a very obvious difference, and it's not. I mean, even with the Charlie Kirk overlap, there are many things I like to say to what you were saying there. First, just don't forget a good example. We'll go back to Kirk in a second. Is Cuomo. Or like, so you literally have a Republican, regardless of what his stances are ideologically. He's not breaking the law, right? Or his religion. You got a Republican in Mamdani, right? Then you've got Cuomo as a Democrat running Cuomo running as a Democrat, and ultimately teams like Trump and the rest of them going vote for the Democrat in the midst of their large effort of saying all Democrats are terrorists. Like, think about how insane that is. You know what I mean? Like, think about shifting from Democrats are terrorists and bad and their ideology is the problem to, oh, well, Cuomo, a lifelong operative for the Democrat Party, right? Very hardcore mainstream political person. And they say vote for the Democrat because he's better than the other guy. And what's the difference? One calls out Israel, the other one doesn't. So they are willing. I mean, it's to your point. It shows you that these people are on the same side outside of all of it when it comes to Israel. Now, the other point was back to Charlie Kirk. The interesting thing is that you come back to the point of that, like where that happened. I don't know how we can deny this anymore. Like Candace Owens and the rest, I mean, we should be critical of what they're showing us. We don't know whether there's more, something going on behind the scenes there. But if you just stand back and look at the way this all went, you look at the what happened up until that, you look at the change that was taking place around Charlie Kirk and his awareness around what I think is Zionism, is interviews with Megyn Kelly, with Candace, with Patrick Bet-David. Like there was like 4 or 5 of them, right? Where he came out and he was saying really contentious things. Now that alone to me speaks volumes. But then it comes back to I'm sure you know all of this, right? About the gray zone work and many others, about the reality that he was threatened by these Zionist people. The Candace proved that his statements that were commenting back and forth, he was questioning his religion. I mean, and think about the effort to try to blindly hide all of that. You know what I mean? And then being caught, and even having the Turning Point USA guy, the new guy, what's his name? Kovlet? I forget his name now, saying, yeah, those are true. And then still trying to sort of hide all of this. Cut to the chase, I think my opinion, based on the facts, which I think are impossible to ignore at this point, is that, or my opinion is that what we saw was Charlie Kirk beginning to turn his opinion of Zionism. He was still supporting Israel. You can clearly prove that. But he saw a problem with Netanyahu and what he was doing to Trump's administration through Iran, through a lot of different things. He saw the influence of Zionism on people who were Christians. I mean, he was talking about this, right? And then all of a sudden you see an issue there where I think he's starting to see, okay, wait a minute. There's a difference between these things, and this thing is a problem, which is what Zionism is. It's an infiltrating, manipulative political organization that has been doing this for a long time. When he sees that, he starts to turn. He starts to deny funding from them. He starts to get pressure from the big Ackmans of the world, people that are trying to push him back into place. He pushes back on it. He speaks to Trump about Iran, and Trump yells at him. All of this is secondhand, but it comes from sources, as you've seen, Tucker, Candace, right? It's hard to deny. And then he dies. And the moment he dies, weird stuff. We can go into all of that if you want to, but I'm sure you've talked about it. All the timing of the filming, the moving of the camera. I mean, it's crazy to me. But the point was, then right after that, what happens? He gets funding from Zionists. You see the thing shift, and basically you get Ben Shapiro and people, basically continuing his thing, pro-Israel, the whole thing. Now you stand back from all of that, not a detective in the world worth his salt is going to deny what that all points to, right? Not going to say you can prove it, but what else are we looking at, right? What else are we talking about? What's the argument that this Tyler Robinson, random person, carried out this act, which is still, what's going on with that? We haven't got, as far as I can tell, he hasn't even pled it. I mean, what is going on with that, by the way? Like, think about where we're at with how long that's gone past. And we still have the family and all the weirdness around that. You've got the argument that it was somehow a trans thing. I don't even think it's been proven that he was even dating that person, as opposed to just maybe living in the same house. I'm both could be, who knows? I don't know. It's completely up in the air. I mean, I can go on forever. There's so many, and I guess the larger point is the conservatives are the ones that are seeing all this,
Yeah, well, that's the thing that's interesting, because there does seem to be a conservative Republican MAGA civil war going on right now, and because there's a America First group who are true to that label, and they're basically saying I'm America First even when we talk about Israel, and I think Charlie Kirk was kind of in that in that realm, and then you have the people who are like, yeah, we're America first, unless you're talking about Israel. And then it's Israel first. And so I think there's some division right now. And I mean, I give a lot of credit to people like Tucker and Candace. They have huge platforms. Mm-hmm. They're saying things that they know are not popular, even with their own, people, their own people that would identify as similar ideologies. And yet they're doing it anyways. And not just that, there is also a bit of a fear, I think, of talking about Mossad and Israel. And it seems, I mean, obviously we all know about the nuclear scientists in Iran that all just happened to die before the age of 30, maybe assassinated. Who knows? I mean, it's just a coincidence. And you look at the long history of assassinations. You look at the long history of blackmails. I mean, there is no doubt, I think, that Epstein was a part of a blackmail operation and also had links to Israel. So there's a very good chance that Mossad and Epstein were all on the same team, part of the same operation.
You've seen all the new, Drop Site News has been doing tons of work on it, but you've probably seen, even Whitney's books from a while, the information around whether he's connected to intelligence is very obvious. Mossad maybe over CIA or vice versa. I think that that's all been fleshing out very clearly. And now these new emails coming out and all the different information. I mean, it's pretty obvious that he worked for intelligence, both Mossad and CIA. But what I continue to see makes it feel more like it's a Mossad element that was a sort of like absorbed by the CIA because it's been, you know, the way I look at it today is that these things, not because it's what Americans want, but because it's been infiltrated, have become, since, as I think Whitney calls it, what, the tri-national security state, right? So it's sort of like one blob that's kind of, you know, but it's not. I mean, but I would argue that it's coming from a Zionist kind of led thing. I know people, we should debate that. Is it the U.S. controlling Israel? I just think it's very obvious to see which way the policy influencing is going, right? I mean, in Israel and Netanyahu, they will go screw off. They'll say, you know, Trump will ask them things and they'll like laugh about it and do the opposite in Israel, right? The reverse, it's pretty clear to see that Israel can like instantaneously control policy in this country. So I think that's pretty obvious, but it's worth debating, you know, because maybe that's the illusion. I can objectively consider that, you know?
Well, I think you're right. I tend to believe that Israel has more influence on us than we have on them for the same reasons, because their politician comes into town and we, like I said, we treat him like he's the second coming of Jesus, and we, you know, we hail to him, we kneel to him, we give him whatever he wants. Even when Trump was working on that ceasefire, and he had that hot mic moment where, because I think it was like right after he was helping negotiate a ceasefire, Israel, like the same day, like went and bombed, you know, a bunch of people. And then he had that hot mic moment where he's like, yep, they don't know what the fuck they're doing, you know? And it was like, you know, I'm like, he's frustrated with the fact that they don't give a fuck what Trump wants.
Right.
You know, and I always say this. So if we know if Epstein is linked to Mossad and you know, there's all this blackmailing going on, I mean, think about the amount of power that Epstein had and influence and how little F's he gave to have a, you know, a ex-president, the United States of America, Bill Clinton, painted in Monica's dress and having that painting in his living room where everybody walks and sees. If that's not a FU to authority, if that's not a I'm untouchable, then what other evidence would you need to see that literally people at the, I mean, if everybody more or less agrees that the US is, at least, you know, if we're talking about militaries and whatnot, like we're the most powerful country in the world. And then you think about, okay, then the president of the most powerful country in the world must have like another level of respect for him. You must have, you know, this level of respect for him. He has this amazing influence and power and whatnot. So Epstein looks at that and says, none of that shit means anything. I'm going to have a painting of this dude in his, you know, in the biggest scandal, you know, of his career, in the dress.
Which was a Mossad overlap. That's, you know, there's a connected point to Lewinsky and the whole overlap from Israel. And so I would argue that was probably gifted to him. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that's probably from Netanyahu for all we know. Like that wouldn't surprise me. Seriously. Yeah. Because you've seen those, like the golden pager that they gave Trump. Like to me, that's a threat. Like, we could debate that forever. I could be wrong. It could, you know, memorializing one of the most obvious terror attacks I've ever seen in my life that hurt 75% women and children. But like, or example, the 50 states won Israel, right? Remember that weird thing they did where they invited all the 250 members of Congress to come there and like bow before Israel, where Netanyahu got up and said, you all have a piece of Israel in your pocket. I mean, really? After what we just talked about? Like, to me, that's a threat. That's my opinion. That's saying, don't forget. Yeah, because, you know, these people all very much know. Or that clip from 60 Minutes, where after the pager attack, the member of Mossad, that was set up by Israel, by the way, went on the show and said, we can build companies anywhere in the world. We set up fake companies and affect the supply chain. They said that literally on the record. And a recent interview from the ex-head of Mossad came out and admitted that they have done that with technology and equipment on literally every country in the planet. They think how brazen that is. You know why I think they're willing to do that? Because they're desperate right now, and what they're doing is saying, don't forget. That's what I genuinely believe. Completely my opinion. It's about trying to float the idea that if you challenge us, Samson option. For those that don't know, that's a very documentable thing. Seymour Hersh wrote a book about it. It means it's an actual option they have in regard to like a military plan that should they start to lose control, like of everything, that they will launch nuclear weapons basically against everybody. That now where and how is it's debatable. but that nuclear weapons will be launched in an effort to sort of like, if we're going to go down, so will everybody. Now think about the kind of mindset that is. And it's a very well Seymour Hersh wrote a book about it that's very well documented. And this is something even Israel has nodded to, that we can acknowledge is real. So if they have a plan that's military, or rather nuclear holocaust for the world, if we get taken out, think about what else they'd be willing to do, especially as they start to lose more power. So right now they're that cornered animal. Right. They're backed up right now. They're willing to do anything. And that's why I think we're starting to see some of the most extreme actions, like, doubling down on genocide that the whole world can see,
Yeah, I wonder if the aliens have read that Seymour Hersh book, because that's when they're coming. Well, once they know that plan is going live, that's when they're coming.
You mean like stop it from happening?
Yeah, they're like, these idiots are going to kill everybody. And
hey, we're trying to farm you here, guys. We're trying to farm you.
I know. And those theories, I mean, that's the thing. It's funny because I was thinking about this recently, how many people in my life I know that truly believe in good, right? They believe in good energy, good spiritual good. They believe in miracles. They believe in, but you get them to talk about evil and they disregard like it doesn't exist. I'm like, you can't believe, if you believe that God or some higher power can grant you this health that you have, or grant you, this recovery, or you didn't die in that car accident because, somebody was looking at, I'm like, so if there's higher powers that can do good in the world, why is it hard to believe that the devil or some evil power isn't the one kind of pushing the evil onto the world?
I'm quote usual suspects. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the people he didn't exist. And it's the same kind. I mean, it's a very well, think about that point in any context, right? It's the best way to manipulate somebody is to get them to a position where they don't even recognize or acknowledge that whatever you're trying to hide is even in the conversation, So you can argue, if you want to take it to like a spiritual level, I would just more argue from like argue that within that paradigm, somehow the government can't be bad. Like for those that may not be spiritual, right? Like you can still make the case for just like whether they're good or bad people. And so we still deal with the same thing where the government's always projecting themselves as the altruistic hero, spreading liberty and democracy. Nobody believes that anymore, guys. I mean, it's special naivety out there that would buy that with what we can see. But from a spiritual point, same kind of thing is that you can argue that going back a long way, that it was in the interest of people trying to deceive you for evil, let's say, to convince you that doesn't even exist. So we're willing to acknowledge the positive, but when we touch on the negative, that's like, that's where the veil comes down. And so then you're more susceptible to falling for evil, especially evil. And this is from a biblical perspective. I don't often get into this because people, I don't like to overlap these things. Like I've talked about before, religion and politics. I feel like, it's important to keep them decoupled because one's fact-based, one's faith-based, but you can argue that of course, and I just lost my thought. Anyways, I've lost my point there. But I often try to decouple those things because I feel like there's a lot of religious overlap in the religious right in the political conversation where people kind of will make arguments based on what God. I don't know how you could take somebody fact-based if they're willing to undermine what you can prove with a religious-based argument. You know what I'm saying? Like I believe in God. I'm a Christian. I wouldn't make an argument based on facts that we can prove that would overlap it with religion. I feel like that's counterintuitive, if you get my point.
Yeah, but I do think that they both have a huge effect on, because I mean, if you change the way you look at things, what you look at changes, right? Everything's perspective. Yep. And I think if you're seeing things from a perspective of Christianity or whatever political ideology you might have, like all those things mold the way you look at something. So it's like, even though it is good that you can keep those things separated. Of course, as a Christian, like I'm sure your worldview is going to affect the way you look at certain things and the way you perceive what is good or what is bad, or, just your opinion on certain situations.
Well, most definitely. But my point is that there's no need to overlap those things. My point is, so what we're doing is a fact-based presentation, right? Here are the facts. How I reached those facts aren't necessarily even important. It can be if you want to flesh this out, but it's about presenting the fact. So if my point is this is the fact because God, because of, this is what the Bible says is right, for example, which, that's a kind of a lazy, but that's the kind of argument we get in the overlap, right? Because those are contradictory things. One is based on what we can prove. One is based on faith. Now, I mean, it's funny, since we're into this, I make this point, I made this point before. People come at me with this because they think they're catching me in a contradiction. Oh yeah, well, do you question everything, right? Do you question God? And they like sit back all like, gotcha, and my answer is yes. And here's the point. This is what's so interesting to me. Maybe you can relate to this as a religious person yourself, is that everything that is, say it before I even get to it, what's frustrating to me, what's interesting, is that there are people making these arguments that don't seem to understand the most basic kind of the central point to Christianity, which is faith, right? And so the point here is that you have something that is based on faith. I choose to believe, not because I can prove God exists. Nobody can prove that. People love to, almost saying that is insulting to some people, but that's the reality, right? If you could prove God exists, then it wouldn't be about faith. You would just say, he's right there. I believe in him, The point is that we choose to have faith, and that's the basis for this, for most religion. And so if you get to a point to where you're arguing something based on faith about facts, well, those things are contradictory. They're not supposed to be in the same conversation, right? But those things mash together. The point is, back to the question everything point, I look at this or anything else, and I look at it. Let's just say religion, Christianity. And the point, do you question? Yes. Could that be fake? Yes, it could be. I can't prove one or the other. I choose to have faith that it isn't. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's the reality. That's the basis for all of these things. And at the end of the day, people in the religious right or any other religious overlap tend to use that faith because I argue because it connects with people, right? Because Donald Trump and the rest, who you can read their books, they're a Democrat that doesn't believe any of those things, right? But they come out and they say the things they won't be able to hear, and they fall into it and they believe in it, so it's a long-winded point, but I just think that's part, like, I think, like, even going back to a biblical sense, since we're talking about it, the reality is that, that the devil is supposed to present himself as being God, as being a positive force, and that will be the trick in Revelations and all that. You know what I mean? And so it's interesting to think about how we have people out here who are projecting all of this stuff about God and using it to convince you to do bad things. Well, sounds pretty clear to me. But anyway, all that's to say, just the faith part of it is not fact-based, and it never will be. And that's what makes it about faith, and so people using that, I think, is disingenuous.
Yeah, I mean, even questioning our own view should be a normal thing, and it shouldn't be, and it's almost funny when people act like, they, like you were saying, oh, I got you, because have you questioned your own faith? Have you questioned your own, what, it's like, no, we've gotten here in this spot, this point in time in my intellectual and spiritual development, because I have questioned everything. And that's what led me down this road of uncovering these things that made me question even more. And that's always the thing that we learn, is that the more you learn, the more you realize you have to learn, right? And the more you think the more you realize you don't know, right? And so it's really all about searching for truth, searching for trying to discover what the meaning of life, what this all means. Like, these are all kind of similar traits we all have in the alternative media community, is that we all are searching for something. We're trying to connect some dots. We're trying either like spiritual dots or just like nature of reality, the meaning of life. Like, these are all dots that we're trying to connect and try to figure out and understand. And really, typically, there's not too many people who get to where we are willing to question both sides, where we don't plant our flag in any ideology. We're not married to any ideas. You don't get there unless you have done all that soul searching prior.
Yeah, right. Well, and this brings back to the same kind of thing we were talking about before. And it's just interesting, like, the idea, like, right now, there's a really weird, and Robert just wrote an article about this, like this effort. His framing was from Israel pushing it, but it's more than just Israel, of the anti-Muslim kind of like, attack on free speech. And it's also being used to frame other groups as sort of like terrorist overlap. It's a very frustrating conversation, because I'm sure we could probably agree that extremism is bad regardless of what color or religion, right? And that's what's so crazy to me. It's like, no, just that kind of extremism, that's the problem. It's like, well, so a Christian that's extreme and willing to kill people for the religion is not as bad? It's like, how does that even make sense? I think it's dishonest. Like a Laura Loomer, I think at the core, she's a disgusting person, but I think even she realizes that she's not, that she's being hyperbolic. But, it's this weird overlap to this. Like, back to the same election point. I was trying to remember, by the way, I don't know if you know who the Republican was in counterbalance to Cuomo. I couldn't remember what his name was. I was trying to remember because the point was it was something about it that made it more relevant, that it wasn't just that it was a Republican, but it was that ultimately, choose the Democrat over the Republican regardless. But there was more to it. I couldn't remember. But the Mamdani overlap is interesting because, he, as a Muslim, socialist, whatever he calls himself, socialist, communist, there's no laws being broken. You know what I mean? Like, aren't we in a country where, like, and to be clear out of the gate, I don't trust any of them. I think just because he calls out Israel, he's still he wants more government. He wants more government in your lives and control. I don't want that, right? I want government at all, right? But he's pushing for, or rather, he's coming to the table with different ideology. And you get people out here who are fighting for this country, a country built on the idea of freedom of ideology and speech, and saying, but not that one. That one's dangerous because it's just bad everywhere in the world. It's just a very weird argument coming from a thing. It's like everything else is happening right now. We have these people pretend to have principles that in direct contradiction with what they're currently arguing. It's whether it's unconstitutional actions and immigration, it's very weird to me. I mean, that comes to the central point of where I think most conservatives are suddenly like acutely aware of where we are, and it's hard not to see that right now, but my point was about this weird effort to sort of create the other in the country, as opposed to being Muslims in overseas or, whatever it was. It's always the other. It's always the bad guy. You're the Assad apologist. You're the Gaddafi apologist. It's always something like that. And today it seems pointed inward, So now you've got this effort to create the other in a place where, Mamdani, whatever, who I think is part of the machine, who is not breaking the law. He's just saying things they don't like. And how long until that becomes whatever you said today? You've talked about all this. It's just very alarming to see how rapidly it's growing in front of us. And the worst people in the conversation are the ones that are getting pointed to and risen up. And I don't think that's organic either, but I refuse to believe we live in a world where someone like Laura Loomer is, that anybody sees her as anything other than a disgusting manipulation, but maybe I have higher hopes for people.
Well, the Madami thing's interesting because I think people are just super concerned about the small baby steps into more and more, government overreach, and
but that's happening everywhere. You know what I mean? Like whether he believes in this or he believes in Christian, like Trump is rapidly, more than Biden, rapidly growing that out, So trust me, I'm with you on that. I think Mamdani is going to be an extension of more government in your life. That's what I'm saying on the show.
Well, I think they've never seen somebody. They've never seen somebody to that. Like he's almost a Bernie Sanders. Extreme views in regards to like these socialist perspectives and whatnot. They've never seen somebody.
They've been trained to hate socialism and communism, which I don't like any government, right? I'm kind of on that side, but it's all of it. But they've been trained to focus on just those things, even though
I agree. I 100% agree with you. I mean, I think it's hilarious that people will. I mean, socialism for the longest time was just used as just like a catch-all word to like justify going into foreign countries, like Guatemala for a United Fruit Company or what. Oh, we're fighting socialism. It's like, are we? Is that what the United Fruit Company is fighting? Socialism. So it's like you look at historically, especially when we were doing it on a regular basis, saying, oh, we have to get involved in this foreign conflict. We have to get involved in these this foreign country and their politics due to socialism. We don't want socialism. It's like it's a ism. It's an idea, and and they all have flaws, right? Like all the isms, I
think they're all the same thing. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, there's different like immediate outcomes, and you could argue that any of them could be, like not what's the right word? Like not weaponized against you. Any of them could be used by people who are altruistic, right? You could have a king, a literal dictatorship where it's a person who does everything they can in every way they can to help everybody be happy. I highly doubt that's going to happen, right? But that's possible. Right. And so you could have communism where they genuinely make a world where people they have access to all they need. Maybe you don't have, I don't think any of these things are good. It's my same point. I think any government deciding what you can and can't do is a problem. But it's just they all, my point is, end up collecting power at the top. Historically, we all see that. What's happening right now is an example of how whatever we call this democracy or republic at all, if we allow it, it will end up being this. And so it's just weird how they over focus on the one. I think it's just because it's about the other, they're not really fighting another form of government. They're just trying to create a situation where you justify whatever they decide they want to do that day, like it's just whether it's for companies and control of South America, or whether it's stealing oil or lithium. It's about, like, that's my point about the USAID overlap, right? We all know, if we're paying attention, that it's sort of a regime change engine, like, and National Endowment for Democracy. And the point was, it was very, whether it's because they made this the case or because it was something else already happening, it's probably both. Biden administration, even before that, and even this day right now, Trump's USAID is still doing this. They use woke ideas to get the foot in the door for agendas they have overseas, right? So that's why Trump, you can still prove, is funding climate change things. He's still funding contraception in West Africa for HIV. Just these are things they made fun of, and they're still to some degree happening, because I think that's the narrative, the tool that helps them get that done in that location. That's all it really comes down to for me, is whatever they can use to rationalize what they're trying to accomplish. Obviously, I'm very pessimistic when it comes to government.
No, but you're making a very good point. I say this all the time, even with socialism and all the isms. They're not necessarily inherently evil. Like, there are people who just believe, hey, in my worldview, if done correctly, this is the best way to go about humans living together. And they all have inherent flaws, right? But it doesn't mean that people who believe in them are, it's a mask to hide their true intentions. There are true believers out there. There's
right. Well, real quick, this is such an important point, man. I'm very glad you brought this up, because, right, you could have, like, if it's a government, right, that has power and you can dive through their history and point out war crimes, well, that's a different story, right? But what you just touched on is important when it comes to a random person, whether Mamdani or somebody else, right? That the idea is the ideology, therefore make him a bad person. Well, what if he just genuinely believes, even if he's wrong, that will help everybody? Right? Is he now bad by default? Because, it's a very problematic, like, logical breakdown, And so it's the same thing now. Both sides are doing the same thing, right? Because you're left wing, now you're a dangerous, villainous person. Because you're right wing, now you're a Nazi, and it's just lazy thinking. And that's why I think that in conjunction with Epstein, with COVID-19, with, 1,000 other small things that have broken down, everyone's waking up. And that's not even, I've been saying this on this show probably how long? Years, right? Look at where we are. And I think it's not just that I was hopeful. I think we were seeing it. Now it's just impossible to deny. And now it's being forced into the mainstream conversation, which I'm glad to see. But I promise you, there's going to be another QAnon. There's going to be another Russiagate, or both simultaneously, like last time. An effort to get you to choose whatever they claim is the good guy part of the government structure, to fight against the other bad guy part, which is what they always do. And some will fall for it, because they always do. But we have to keep pushing and keep the main part of the conversation in this high, with Tucker and Candace and people like that, even though I don't trust them, pointing to some of these things, there's no way you can deny that. Like, that will not go away unless they stop talking about it. So as the audience is out there, force it into their conversation. We control that.
Well, I remember last time I talked to James Corbett, I was telling him how far we've come. I was kind of laughing about the fact that, when I started in 2013, he was I looked up to him because he was doing it longer than I was, and he was doing really deep research, and I really respected his research and his opinions and his perspectives and all the work that he was putting into so many topics like 9/11 and OKC and all this stuff. But it was just, his work was for people like me. And now I'm like, look how far you've come, where you went from being interviewed on like InfoWars to now being interviewed on Dr. Drew and Jimmy Dore. And he was on the High Wire. He was on, which
I'm glad to finally see, by the way. You and I have talked about this in the past, where someone like James Corbett, who is such a foundational part of everything everyone's talking about, and yet only, there's a reason, by the way. There's a reason. And even that there's a reason it's even them, as opposed to, like a Candace and Tucker, which is different. You know what I mean? But I'm just, good on Jimmy Dore for having him on, because that is powerful, man. And he's reaching people.
And Dr. Drew, of all people, like Dr. Drew, and he's not having James on as a crazy person. Like, he's having him on as a expert to talk about what's going on in the world. And it's like how far we've come. So and then you have Tucker releasing his 9/11 documentary.
About time.
Yeah, a little late to the party, Tucker.
Well, he also hated on 9/11 truthers right in the beginning, so it's a little bit disingenuous. Hey, have Dane Wigington, for example. Oh, good. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to ask him, like, is it, or would you say, like, we should celebrate the fact that he's
Both.
willing?
Both.
willing to admit that he was wrong.
Well, as admitting he's wrong, or yeah, it's a little bit of a nuance, but both for sure. Like this is why everything in this kind of conversation today, with where it is, it always becomes one or the other, and it doesn't always have to be. It's we can acknowledge that it's positive that him doing that is reaching people, and also at least consider that him doing it is not genuine, that it's in the interest of trying to convince you that he's on a certain side for whatever comes next. That's just you should consider that about both of us in this show right now. You know what I mean? Like it's just a general question everything, be critical, consider all possibilities, but you can't deny that him saying that is powerful, but as David Icke called him out for example, I've interviewed Dane Wigington twice, David Icke way more than that, way before, and Dane Wigington and geoengineering, I think from Geoengineering Watch is powerful. People have their own opinions, disagree. I think he is spot on when it comes to most everything he's talking about. And I think what he's been covering has been important for a very long time. Tucker only now finally has this guy on, and, arguably to point to where, as David Icke points out, the damage is done. Sorry, look at that. I was just talking about this on my show. This is incredible. It's a ladybug. There's these, sorry, this is just funny to me. It's right now in Tennessee, there's these, they're not really ladybugs. They're Japanese beetles, and they're like taking over the entire town. It's crazy. Like this is inside my closed studio, and I just randomly, like we went outside to this restaurant, and they were just like everywhere, like 10 miles from my house. That's frustrating. Sorry.
No, it's funny because I was just outside coach. It was like I believe it was my last fall soccer game for my daughter's team that I was coaching, and like every time I like knocked a ladybug off me, there was another one coming, and I'm just like,
where are you right now? What state?
Massachusetts.
I wonder if it's sort of like an East Coast thing, because I've never before moving to Tennessee have I seen it, and it's weird. They are like weirdly enough, we have to get into all this, but the difference is apparently the tiniest little thing. Like it's either like an M or a T, like this little thing on their head, and that's the only difference. If it's a T, it's ladybug. If it's an M, so I'm like, they're ladybugs then. What are we talking about? It's the exact same thing, but it's just wild, man. And at first I'm like, did something happen like around our property? Like what? But it's just weird. Like to me, that's not normal. To me, that even when it comes like outside of maybe like a monarch kind of a thing where it's inherent to like there, and it's only, they mass migration. When you get like this wild overpopulation like that, to me, that's like an imbalance in our environment. Like something just, man, anyway, just interesting. Because I think there's a lot of environmental stuff to get into as well. Just crazy stuff happening. Well, I forgot where I was. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. But that's an important, thing also just to touch on. I mean, there definitely does seem to be a imbalance. Like I do not feel like we are one with humanity and the universe, and I think the opposite is more likely, that there is a imbalance. And there's that documentary, of course it was probably funded by Soros or Bill Gates, about how the world would be better off, or both together, how the world would be better off without humans, like everything would be in balance. And even though it was probably some definitely funded by some depopulation perspective person, I do think that it is true that
that's subjective.
And we've done a lot of, we've done a lot of unnatural things, and with the world probably is not in balance. And if everything was in balance, at least to some extent, more than it is now, maybe the water would be cleaner, the air would be cleaner, the animals would be more lively and healthier. Maybe we would be healthier.
As Catherine points out, she calls it the great poisoning. She's of the mind that this is not in any way accidental, that whether it's the COVID-19 shot part, whether it's the mass kind of like, I don't know what the right word would be, like adjective, like, dipping the planet in glyphosate, essentially, like in earnest, that's essentially what we did, or, you can go off endocrine disrupting chemicals and everything everywhere, or the dioxins that we don't even talk about, even though it's like the most dangerous thing we know of. These are not accidents, and these things are destroying the way our planet works. It's just incredible, But to your point, though, it's not. I would argue that's an objective fact. It doesn't have to mean that we're calling for the end of humanity. It just is what it is. That without humans, the world would be a very symbiotic. Because if you look back before, I think what it is the difference of as a human species, we've evolved beyond our kind of tribalistic kind of, you know what I mean, like we're individualist, and because when you're more of a like a herd. You go back long enough, we're very herd animals, that ultimately that changes the dynamic of the way you operate. And, or now there's a lot of different things, technology, for example, to where it could be that way. And maybe it's the fact that we've been driven away from that. It's hard to say. But the point is that the world would be left to its own devices without us. Everything, it would, what's the right word for it? Symbiotic's the right word, but it just works together to achieve kind of like the best outcome. And that's totally within our ability. We could do that, and I would even argue, crazy enough, most people would probably argue they want to do that. And yet here we are. Government probably.
Or maybe we're not even from this planet. maybe
that's a very good point. Yeah.
Maybe we're not supposed to be here. That's why we're making everything imbalanced. Maybe we're like, I think we joked around a little bit before, right in the beginning, about how what did we say? I felt like we referenced being from another planet, or being used as like animals, by some higher power. But
right, yeah,
yeah,
right.
It's when people talk about, like, our infatuation with gold, you ever hear of how they think about how humans were put here to mine gold for like the aliens or the what? I mean, it is kind of weird. There's a lot of weird shit that doesn't make sense.
And now it's rare earth minerals. It's just everything else now.
Yeah. Well, it's true, but like even gold, like why throughout history, since the beginning of civilizations, why have we been so intrigued with this shiny metal? There's tons of different shiny metals, and ones that are probably more useful than gold. So and when you look at like the telepathy tapes, and when you really go into just all the evidence that we're like one consciousness, and we're all connected, and that everything is alive, water, everything has some type of effect or memory or something.
Yeah.
There's and that's really what makes it all intriguing. Like the conspiratorial world is no different than all these other worlds, because it's all a search for truth, either the truth of the origin of man, the purpose of man, the the universe, whatever it may be. It all, to me, it's all related, and it's all connected. And when you uncover one thing, it helps you connect the dot, or get another puzzle piece that hopefully uncover the other things.
Well, that's what we do. We're seeking the truth, wherever that leads is the people doing it in earnest, not just the truth we like to tell. The point is to seek that out wherever it leads you, even if it's uncomfortable, and yeah, I mean, there is some weird stuff out there. I mean, sure, than anybody going down these different rabbit holes and conversations, you come across stuff that's just, whether it's disconcerting or just unnerving or terrifying. There's a lot of really weird stuff out there. I've over the years made a really clear effort to kind of like pivot into, because in the beginning I talked about all sorts of stuff that's just entertaining wise, a conspiracy theory, like in the real sense, like the ones we consider like the, moon landing, whatever. But that I've pivoted into what I think is more, fact-based reporting on what you can prove, because we're at a point where everything is so uncertain and there's so many manipulations and undermine that if you just, err on the side of your principles, err on the side of what you can prove, even if that means nothing, right? And just, if we can't prove it, then we just don't act like we know. And, it limits what you can discuss, what you can point out, but it's consistent, and people can rely on it, because I always have source material and you can come to your conclusions about it. It's like that. Isn't it weird how few people do that? In a field of people supposed to be breaking down the truth, it tells you something, but I always have enjoyed talking about these things like the moon landing, or, because most of them have some nugget of truth to it. And usually I argue, like with the moon landing or any of these other, that one, or like a flat earth point, that the conclusion I largely disagree with, but there's something to it. There's an open-ended thing that points to something, and then the conclusion gets made, which I argue is not the correct conclusion, but it's still something that gets ignored because the conclusion is not what makes sense. It's like Alex Jones and the frogs turning gay. It's like, well, that was a real story that him dancing in a frog suit can effectively hid from everybody. We've talked about that.
Yeah, well, that's how a lot of these conspiracies, some of the more radical or fringe ones, stay alive. They stay alive not because there is no truth to them. It's because there's nuggets of truth to them. So,
right.
new people to those conspiracies would be like, yeah, but that's kind of weird, and that seems to be factual, and that seems to be true, and there's some dots that you can connect, and you can point at this or that, and so there's a lot of that, and that's why even like David Icke, I've interviewed him too. And I think he's the only person who can hold a conversation longer than you and I.
Yeah.
but but it's a lot of things that he said that seemed the most fringe in regards to like his perspective on reality and vibrations and all these things. Like, when I had him on, and I think I had him on right after I had either right before or right after I had Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell from the telepathy tapes on, who
Mhm.
researched these nonverbal autistic kids who were able to read minds and know what their parents were thinking and all this stuff. I'm like, so she's, kind of her research is now becoming mainstream, and things she's basically just evidence, giving evidence for things that he's been saying forever and
Right.
called a lunatic, and so it's like, yeah, it's fascinating because it's like we are trying to uncover like what does this all mean, and like even the AI thing I wanted to talk to you because I think I've sent you some songs, but I've been
Right.
using AI to help write music again because I just can't find there's a thing called like the gap, right? Like there's your imagination, like the gap between your imagination and then bringing it to life, right? There's like all the work that comes in between that's the
Mhm.
gap, right? Like you have the final product of like, okay, here it is, this is the thing that started in my brain, and and then I feel like AI when with music, with art, with thumbnails, with whatever it may be, like you can shrink that gap, but
Mm.
it still requires creativity. It still requires for it to be good, right? And the thing about computers and AI, it can't be creative. Like I still have to give it a idea, and then it has to analyze other people who had creative ideas, and then it
Mhm.
uses other people's
Oh, I see what
creativity,
you mean. Yeah, yeah.
with mine to so for example some of the songs I've released, um I've released like I believe six of them, and within the last couple of months, it would have took me literally with the little free time I have, it would have taken me not even an exaggeration, probably a couple years, at
Mhm.
least two, to get these songs from my brain out, like actually out and recorded where you could play it on Pandora and Spotify and iTunes, like the songs I release now. And especially doing everything solo, because my previous music, like my theme song to the Ripple Effect podcast, that was all done solo. I did the guitars, the vocals, the keyboards, the drum machines. I don't play drums. That's like the one instrument I'm not anywhere near to, capable of even attempting to play.
Mhm.
But I understand music. I've, similar to like, I think all things in my life, I've analyzed it. Probably why you're, a good musician too. You're good at analyzing music and analyzing things in general. Where you can kind of start figuring out, okay, what sounds good? How do I make this sound good, or whatever? Or what's a good
Mhm.
song? What's a, what's the structure of a song? How I should write these lyrics and whatever. And so my point is like there's this like internal debate even with myself, and I know there's a external debate. Like I saw a interview with the CEO of Spotify recently because I was kind of like interested in like going down some rabbit holes of like getting people's opinions on AI music, and I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
what are people saying? Like, what's people in the industry saying? What's the CEO of Spotify saying? I just happened to run into an interview with him where he was talking about it, and it seems like there's a confliction, right? But and then you think about like just technology in general. Does the painter or the person who used a pen and paper, or some type of palette or whatever, does he frown upon the graphic designer who uses a computer? Does he, does the mixer and the guy who is mastering music with a analog mixing board and analog equipment, frowning upon the guy who's using Pro Tools, or
Well, really, really quickly though, that's interesting because the difference would be the actual machine, like so, as opposed to using paintbrush, right, to do it is not the same as you put a program that painted it for you and then you brought it to the real world. There's a difference there, right? Because the graphic designer is not, I mean, I would argue that does go there. You could use tools, but when it first started, you're really just using an online version to map these things out. But the difference today is using a tool that does that for you, and then you bring it to real life. So, like, you see what I'm saying? I'm just adding to your point because
Okay. So let me push back a little bit. So
Mhm.
let me, and this is just a fun like little thought experiment. So I agree with you, but so if you use that virtual paintbrush, you're right. Like you're basically doing the same thing. You're just using a tool that makes that same thing easier. Well, now we take it to the next step, the next level. Well, now in your head, you're using that paintbrush, that virtual paintbrush, and you're painting something, right? Well, what if I just asked it? I could describe exactly what I was going to eventually paint, anyways.
Mhm.
So now I'm cutting another corner because now instead of like actually doing it,
It comes to
I'm
the action.
asking it to do it, and then I can take that thing that it gives me, and then I can modify it or change it. But instead of
Mhm.
changing it with a physical brush or a virtual brush or a software brush, uh,
Yeah.
I'm asking it to do it. So it's
But
like,
it comes to the action, though, right? It comes to the point to where you are doing it or they're doing it, right? Because you could do the same thing. Write me a novel, and then I'll go through and edit it the way I like. It's like the difference is that they wrote it as opposed to you writing it, or like hypothetically, like so. The point is you can open like a thing, a paintbrush, and you're using it on a computer, so you're the one directing what actually happens. You're just using a different medium to do the painting, as opposed to saying, "Paint me this," and then adapting that to the real world. You see,
but
it's
what
there's one
but
more
what if
step
you're saying
removed.
it? But what if you say to paint you this, and it's the same thing that you would have painted with the brush anyways?
How,
Then
hypothetically speaking,
then
though, like if it, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, aren't you basically getting to the same, and you're shrinking that gap, right? Like the gap we
It's
talked
the
about.
same, right? But see, here's the thing: is that you can't know for sure that what you asked it to paint would have been what you would have painted without, you know what I mean? Like if you were to paint something in a picture, put it behind your back, and then say, "Do this," I would bet you my life that it wouldn't be the same thing you painted. It may be somewhat similar, because there's no way to vision. It would be taking your, it's a funny thing. I remember doing this in like elementary school where the exercise was like, give me one, a bullet point steps on how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And you're doing it to somebody who is, like an alien from another planet. It's an interesting experiment because you take things for granted that you wouldn't normally do. So it's like the idea is that you can envision it a certain way, but you don't really know for sure that it would ultimately end up in doing what it thought you wanted, and you may not explain it the right way. But either way, the point is that it's them doing it either way. Even if it is exactly the same, that they're the ones doing the action. To me, that's the difference. But I mean, it's an interesting thought process, right? Because people might argue that you're the one dictating that it do it, so you're in
Well, you're
control. But
okay. So pretend we had we go 100 years. Oh, we don't even have to go 100 years. This is probably going to happen in the next 10 years. So in the next 10 years, you're mentally connected to a virtual computer.
okay, that's different. Yeah,
You can imagine the song that's in your head, right? And because
yeah,
the thing is that you have to take in consideration too is that sometimes the thing that's in our head, the creative song or creative art that we're trying to now recreate in the physical world, sometimes we're limited, right? Because
right.
like for example, I might have really creative ideas in regards to like maybe art for like for example, I designed this design for the Ripple Effect podcast. It was inspired
Mhm.
by like some Fit for a King, a band that I really like, Christian kind of metalcore band that I really like. They have some cool logos, and I'm like, okay, I love that design. I'm like, let me get something that's like inspired by that.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
I'm
there's
like,
something to say for that. That's
no,
interesting because that
no,
good, good.
no, okay, no, sorry. I like, well, we need both of us have way too much energy, and we're like,
No, it's just because we both do the same thing, and
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
trying to get in comments without stopping your flow because otherwise we get way too far past it and I forget.
Oh, I'm the same way. That's
We're
exactly.
both exactly the same.
We are exactly the same because I'm like I'm not trying to be rude, but I'm like I know if I
Right.
don't say this now, I might. And sometimes it's relevant to right now. And if you let
Yes.
somebody
Right.
talk for too long, we'll get away from that thing, and then we'll never get
Exactly.
to that thing. Yeah.
And
So
you
I'm
and I will almost always get away from that thing if left to our
yeah.
devices. That's the truth.
Yeah. Sometimes people interrupt me and they're like, "Oh, sorry for interrupting you." I'm like, "No, no. Sometimes I need interrupting.
Right.
It's a good thing."
That's so
I'm like,
funny.
somebody needs to stop me, or I will just continue talking. Um,
You're so much alike in that way. But my thought though is that, there is something to be said for that being its own thing. like that, like not to be diminished or not, like just it's interesting. Like so, between you and this, you're coming to something completely different than either of them by themselves. That's interesting because that is the very essence of art, right? But I would argue that it's still, it's not like it's good or bad. It's just different, right? Like so at the end of the day, if you wanted to argue, like so through this, you like I would argue you include that AI was included in the process, right? Like that's, because I feel like that would be the honest thing to write on there. But it is different, not necessarily good or bad. It's just that doing it completely alone from that, and then maybe like, well, here's the difference. Like so you write a song completely organically, add it to them, and then say AI add drums or something. Like, that I would argue that's still completely your independent original work that's just added to, as opposed to saying, here's my idea for this song, make it. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? It's
No,
an
that
interesting time because this is gonna, like you said, this is gonna be everywhere very soon.
well that's kind of and I kind of agree with that because with my music, it is my lyrics. I
Mhm.
like I start with the idea. The crazy thing is how powerful it is because it's like I mean, I released music like the music for my podcast or the music that eventually inspired my podcast became the theme song. That intro song was like released in like I don't know 2013, 14, somewhere along those lines, and it's like nothing close to this it was even exists at the time. I remember being on my computer for hours, like using the drum machine, using this, using it, and now it's like I can say like, hey, I want this drum beat. It just
Right.
creates it.
You
Or
know
I
what's
oh, go ahead.
well, just that's interesting. So essentially, you've made a band with AI. Like, not that AI is doing your music, but you're part of a band with an AI band member.
Yeah.
Essentially, that's
So,
interesting.
so, so for example, like I would have to, take, I would write the lyrics, then I would like, okay, in my head, this is this sound and the feel of the song, and I would have to recreate it, and it would take forever, and
Mhm.
I would have to, come up with a drum beat, but then I'm limited on my ability to use like the virtual drum machine. So now it's like to get the drum beat that I want, maybe the double bass, the hi-hat, whatever it may be, super time consuming. I'm like trying
Yeah.
to find the right drum kit sound. I'm trying to, whatever, trying to get this specific type of sound that, I eventually get. Then I have to, play the guitar and then I have to find the right guitar sound and all, so there's all these layers, right? And then the
Right.
keyboards and then I have to record my vocals. Then it's like, oh, now the vocals sound great. Like, oh, my, that note was a little off or whatever. And, so it can be so time consuming. So, and then what happens is that the thing you end up eventually creating isn't exactly what you're hearing in your head, but
Mhm.
it's not exactly what you're hearing in your head, not because the thing in your head should be different than the thing you created or you're trying to create something different, but it's because you're limited with your talents and your ability to use software and technology to recreate it identically. You get
Oh
what I'm
yeah,
saying?
you could say it that
So,
way. Yeah,
so,
definitely. Like if
so
given enough advances, you could do that.
exactly. So, like
Yeah.
for example, I was talking about this shirt design.
Mhm.
If I could take a Fit for a King logo on one of their shirts and I could say, hey, you know, take this logo and do this, that, and whatever, or combine it with this logo or change this or change that. And what I could do, it will make the process. So it's like in my head, I have the image of what I want it to look like. And what it's doing, it's almost like having an assistant with helping you
Right.
create that, and so it's like I still think like, and I do hear stories of like people who are doing, I mean, even fake podcasts. I don't know if you've heard of
Yeah.
this, but like
Oh
people are
man,
doing,
it's
they're picking two
everywhere.
voices like, hey, I want a male and female voice. I want them to talk about this topic for an hour. And they're just
Yeah.
putting it out there. To me, there's something very not real and, so, about that. Like, so when I do the AI music, I think the biggest thing that I think somebody could critique me on, and maybe I am critiquing myself on a little bit is the vocals. I haven't sung for real, like in the shower maybe a little bit, but like I haven't sung in like a band or like on a track in a long time. I would sound like shit for a really long time until my vocal cords got like used to like screaming and singing and whatnot. Um,
Mhm.
so like I use AI vocals. Like I even try using my own vocals and putting it in AI and like and I'm like
Mhm.
I don't even like my vocals as much as I like the one that's giving to me. So I'm like I'm going to use the one that they're giving to me. It's actually but you can choose all those things. So like I think
Mhm.
that's probably the least organic part of the song, but it's my I could this is how powerful it
It's
is.
your vision.
I could mumble, like just do a shitty job singing the song. I'm gonna be like, sing it in the microphone, record it, and just be like, hey, I didn't hit those notes perfect. I didn't, but you kind of can see the melody that I'm looking for, whatever. Put it in AI,
Hmm.
in the AI, software that I'm using, and and then say, hey, I want this type of sounding voice, a male voice,
Yeah.
sounding like this, whatever, da, da, da. And it'll generate ideas, and it'll
But
just, so it's like, okay, what I end up getting is not me singing, not
mhm.
my voice, but the idea. I still feel connected to it because it's my
Yeah,
lyrics, my melody, I inspired it. So it's like it.
definitely. But it's something, but see, it's like I said before, it's like you've joined a band. It's, you have to acknowledge that it's that part that wouldn't have been there if that part hadn't been, so it's as if you brought in an AI band member and they added to what you see. You like, your point's very interesting because you can't argue that it's not your thing. You are the one that had the idea, you created it, you gave it the guidance, but it's just with AI inclusion. Like that's this like the only difference. That doesn't have to be bad or good. It's just it's the new thing, right? This is what makes it different, is that the organic side of it. Well, I just take it to the full conclusion, like you're saying, is that now people are going make this song for me, and then arguing that that's somehow like not like here's what I want, like not like you're doing, but like basically create a song for me based on this title or something, and then just taking that work. And so in essence, that wasn't there before, but it's like it's a weird overlap, and I think that that is a dangerous step, right? That I don't think we're going to be able to get away from. It's definitely coming, and we just have to prepare ourselves for that. And I think there's going to be a market for people who, compare. Here's an AI newscaster, here's an AI musician, here's an AI, and they fall into that world. They like it more, and there's going to be a market for those that want the organic. There's going to be a market for the overlap, and there's going to be platforms or programs that are like made to be able to prove the ones that are pretending, I made this myself. No, you're AI, you're busted. It's like that's where this is going to be going. But it's interesting because you bring up a really important point that there are people that will use this like yourself with genuine intention, with no, making it clear, highlighting it, and then produce some excellent music. And there's no reason that we shouldn't enjoy that. It's like these are all lines like with Grok and all this stuff. We just did an IMA panel about this. That there's we all have to individually decide where our lines are, right? Where is a line in the line in the sand where we're going to say, I'm not going to give my face print to Twitter, even if that means I get kicked off the platform, and at the same time, and this is what I think is the most important, we shouldn't be projecting our principles onto other people. Everyone can make their own choices about where they think, like you're I use Grok on the platform here and there to make the point about how the Republican platform is showing you that they're lying. It's an interesting kind of point to make about how he's editing it every day to hide, but yet here it is telling you that Elon's lying. Like I find that interesting while still questioning it. Some people point out that I'm being hypocritical by using it. It's like, well, I make that choice every day on where I think that falls. But the point is, individually, we need to make those decisions. Where that will be, and when not when it's in your face, choose this or go to the back of the line. It needs to be before you get there, and that's what we're talking about right now, individually, because everyone wants to create these purity test lines for the teams left and right, and whether you reach it, you're not part of the team anymore, or it's just everywhere you look, it's an individual choice, and we're going to have to make a lot more of them as this continues, especially if we don't stop what's coming.
Yeah, but I do think that a having a human level of creativity as a gradient to whatever you're creating is going to be required, or people are not going to enjoy it. Like I think so.
Well, I would agree, but yeah,
Yeah,
I guarantee there's going to be a market for some weird, like cartoon or AI porn that exists and people watch it. There's going to be a market for it, no matter what it is. People, and you'll even have the whole technocratic transhumanist groups that are like, this is the real stuff. This is the new world. Like, you're fake now. The organic stuff, we want that's, I guarantee that's going to come. Maybe even part of the agenda.
yeah. Well, I mean, I think, if you were talking about people specifically using a brush or using a mouse, kind of like a pen in real life, but there are
Mhm.
people who, for a long time on graphic design, programs can cut those corners and,
Mhm.
never have to draw a shape. They can just input it, right? Or they can just,
Right.
whatever, or they never have to fade from one color to another. They can just use some input, some type of feature or tool to kind of do those things. So it's like we're constantly looking for ways to cut corners, or like I said, like shrink that gap between what's in our imagination and then how do we bring it to life. Like for example, like I've the reason why I got so into AI music was because I just didn't have. I've always loved me. I'm around these instruments with that most of the time have dust on them because I just can't find the time to pick it up and actually do something and be creative. But I really, really enjoyed. I mean, it was a huge part of my life. I really enjoyed writing music. I enjoyed writing lyrics. I enjoyed being creative, in that aspect. But I just couldn't find the time to do it. And then what happened with AI was that I started fooling around with it and I'm just like, wow, like I can bring a song to life in 1% of the time that it would typically take me. And it's like, if I can do something I enjoy and bring these lyrics to life, bring this song that's in my head to life and cut some corners doing it, then why not? Right. And but I think
But
that,
again, as long as that's being clearly stated, that's my only add-on. Like as long as that's, like you're not putting it out as if that didn't happen, then I'm all for it. I think it's great. It's a new addition to what we already have, which is what you're doing.
yeah, yeah. Well, and when you look at like music in general, like for a long time, we were already accepting musicians that weren't actually using musical instruments. I mean, you
Yeah.
look at Dead Mouse, we look at Marshmello, you look at Tiesto, you look at all, Van Buren, all these DJs, Dead Mouse joked around about how like he can't play any instrument. Like everything he does is online.
You know what's interesting about that though? See, here's the difference. Well, I just the point to make is that there's different parts, like you highlight. Even going back to this is an interesting point about like shapes for graphic design, right? Nobody would ever go, you have to put an asterisk that says you didn't draw that circle, right? I think it's because it became the industry standard. Even though realistically you should, to some degree, you didn't completely do this on your own, but it became so common that they know everyone does that to where it just became, well, so then that's the norm. So we don't have to acknowledge it. Like in the music field, you're right. There was a very clear, and it's still there, like whether it's like putting in a drum kit, but it's the same kind of thing. That's been almost prominent in the music field for a while now. Like, what's it called? Garage band, instead of going to an actual studio, you're doing it in your room with a computer, and it's like that because that became such the new thing. I don't even think it required that you put that there, but now AI coming into it, it's going to go probably the same direction. I'm willing to bet you it's probably already happening. We don't even know where people are using AI. And now that's going to be something they don't even need to include because like you're saying, we didn't, we just put a drum kit in and then here's our band, and it's like, I think it's important for not necessarily knowing the organic part of it, but just where this world is going to be able to discern, to identify where that line is, where AI is included, where it's not, almost for reasons that we probably can't even recognize yet. Like there's going to be more, the meaning will become more and more important as AI becomes more and more a part of our lives and more dictating where we can go and what we can say and what we can think, and which is what's actually happening, And so that's why I think that line needs to be clear. It's the same thing I say about biometrics. We all see them scooping up our biometrics and scans and face prints. We don't even really grasp what that means yet, even though they're making digital twins and SimCity versions of our world. It's like that, which is real, and mapping out what you'll do and gamification, the game theory. At the end of the day, 10 years from now, 5 years, 20 years, what is it going to mean when they have the rights to everything that is Ricky? To the point to where they can recreate a Ricky AI, maybe in the real world. Like, what does that mean? It's like, these are the things we have to start thinking about. Like, what does it mean when you start to use that? Now it's maybe not way down the line, but in a mental sense, it's like, we're not even there yet, but I find this stuff so fascinating because, we're going to be feeling this out like you're doing right now. Is this worth it? Is it valid? And you're coming at it from a good place, right? You're using it as I think anybody should if they want to, in an organic, natural way where you're going, I don't have the time, but I want to make this work. But as I said, there's going to be governments that use this, whether it's like a deep fake, whether it's, I argue, retroactively altering things that are already publicly online. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of stuff we're going to get. And that's why I think it's important that we have these things notated in a law. I argue that's why you get an overlap of things like, blockchain is being used by the government for anything other than keeping themselves accountable. I want to go away from that when it comes to a lot of things, but if we're going to be using this, like with the way Trump's administration's using it, the one thing they should be doing is keeping a living ledger of everything they're spending in the military, everything they're spending in the government. They'll never do that because we'll be able to hold them accountable. Same kind of thing,
Yeah, it is weird because there is already some levels of, or at least some evidence that we've already transitioned from doing things in the analog kind of more material world into the digital world, and we've accepted it as almost the same way as we did the analog stuff. When you look at, like, I talked about some of these DJ, EDM producers or whatnot, they don't create any of the music, right? And nobody says that, hey, he doesn't even play a keyboard. Like, he's, let's not listen to him, or let's say that he, because I think it becomes an issue when you talk about news, when you talk about media, when you talk about these type of things. Like, if they're selling you a narrative, if it's content creators in regards to, like, influencers or whatnot, podcasts. So if you're influencing ideas or whatever, like, yeah, we want to know if it's fake or real or what you're doing. When it comes down to art, I almost feel like it really is just a tool to, like, if a graphic designer. And it's funny because on one of the Union of Unwanted podcasts, this guy Alex, who actually painted, oh, wrong side, painted that behind me,
Mhm.
he gave it to Sam and I when Sam was in Connecticut to do some stand up with Eddie Bravo. And then he came and showed up, and he was a huge fan of the Union of Unwanted and painted it and gave it to us. And Sam's like,
Nice.
he's like, hey, you want to take it because you're driving home, I'm flying home. And so I put in the studio, but I was talking to Alex on the Union of Unwanted about, like, hey, how often do you use AI? Do you, and because obviously he can paint, he's a
Mhm.
very creative artist. He does shows or whatnot, and he's like, yeah, without a doubt. He's like, sometimes I use it because, the time it would take for me to modify this, design or see it on something else. Like, for example, I have a couple of new designs that I put in Gemini that I'm like, hey, can I see that design without the background? Or can I see that design with this type of font? Can I see that design on a t-shirt? Can I see that design? So it's like, it's one of those things where, again, it's like I'm looking at it as like there's a gap between the final product that I'm trying to create and then where it starts in my head. And it's like, if it helps me shrink that gap where I can waste less time playing with all these things, like I was saying with music, same thing. Like, hey, how does this song sound with these type of drums, or this
Mhm.
type of? Oh, you know what? Maybe this song doesn't have a feel of like a heavy metal, metalcore type song. Let me try more of a EDM feel. Now I got to go change the keyboard sounds to more synth or more, pulsing or whatever. Or maybe I want this. So it's like, and it's all these time consuming things. So it's like, yeah, I do agree. Like, it's going to get to a point where, like, how much synthetic AI, input does it have on the final product, to the point where, like, it's just not organic at all. And I think that is an issue. I think, on that podcast with the Spotify CEO, he talked about how there's people who are just putting not just hundreds, but like thousands of songs, AI generate songs, just on the web. And I'm just like, yeah, like that does suck, because, like, the stuff that I'm doing is going to be compared to that stuff, which is just like a person's having very little influence on what's being created. Where, like, I'm still, like, spending lots of time on each part of the song. I'm putting it
Mhm.
in after it's generated. I'm putting it in Pro Tools. I'm cutting out what I don't like. I'm modifying this. I'm changing that guitar riff. I'm doing, so it's like I'm still having. I want to have an input and influence on the final product, because the final product shouldn't be what the AI creates, but it should be the
Right.
AI helping me create what I want to create, right? And
Yeah.
and that's the difference. And so I guess, I mean, I'm answering my question while I'm talking out loud. But it's yeah, I think I'm resolving the issue while while talking. But I guess that would be the difference. Like, that's a
Yeah.
very big difference. It's like, okay, am I using it to create something for me, or am I using it to create the thing that I'm imagining, right? And I
Right. That's kind of what I was saying is that it's whether you're saying make that song for me with inputs or you are elements of the song that you are asking it to add to. That's and but again, like you said though, that line is going to blur. Even that line, eventually, and then the industry standard will be that we start with a basis of these things and then add to it. It's like that's where that seems like it's going to go, and that's why I think it's important to set those lines now so we can see. Because if that line is blurring, which it already is, then there will inevitably come a time where it is no longer seen, right? And so we need to make sure we know where that is and what is AI. It's the same thing as say with deep fakes. It's we know that's there, and yet we don't see to care that nobody's really putting any, there's nothing like right now there are tools the government can use to decipher what's a deep fake. If they, even then they argue that the technology is rapidly advancing so much they can't even catch up. Who knows if they're lying about that? But at what point do we then lose track of what is and isn't fake because there's no way to tell? It's just, I'm not saying there needs to be some kind of control mechanism, like it's the opposite, but just at the end of the day, we need to be aware of where that goes and just make sure we're keeping track of that. And if somebody like a open source tool wants to be created to be able to, be able to tell where it is, sort of like the AI or not kind of a thing, I'm all for it. I think that's where we need to be because that's, where it's going. But I'm going to have to break off here in a couple minutes, but I'm enjoying the conversation, man. Like more than usual. I feel like I've really enjoyed what we're talking about today.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at such a tipping point in the world in regards to like so many different things. I think we're like rediscovering the world around us and like what is reality and
Yeah.
we're people are entertaining what were extreme and fringe ideas. And I also think, there's a bit
Finally.
of yeah, finally, yeah. And I also think there's a little bit of fear of like what's around the corner, like where are
Yeah.
we going? And but yeah, so for people listening, thank you, Ryan, as always for coming on the show. It's always a fun and fascinating conversation, and I love just riffing with you because I just love bouncing things off you and seeing your perspective on things, and you always have interesting ones. So if people want more of those interesting perspectives, where can people find you? I know you were live streaming today. You got a new episode that you just did. It's amazing the endurance that you have after live streaming. Then you come here and talk to me. But where can people find your work? What platforms are you on? And anything new or exciting around the corner to look out for?
No, thank you. And I always enjoy our conversations, man. It's always just, we, like you said, we're very similar in a lot of ways. And I think we have a way of, kind of just feeding off each other and having a really interesting and in-depth conversation. I always enjoy it. But platforms, thelastamericanvagabond.com as always is the website. And, you'll find us on just about every platform out there. I recommend you go to our main site and go from there. But there's plenty coming. I mean, I'm going to keep doing the show, building as best I can. I think there's, more writing will be coming. I'm trying to add more writers in general. The one thing I'll just kind of flirt at, I don't want to get into it yet because we're still planning, but Whitney and I are working on something that will potentially be coming soon in regard to a overlap between our two platforms. And so there's just more, there's more coming in general, more IMA panels, that's going to continue to grow. Just in general, I think we're at a really good time. As much as it's always like the kind of corny analogy of the dark room before the dawn. It really is exactly where I think we are, where there's just so much coming down. People are waking up, whether it's because of some yuga cycle transition, or, whatever it is. Like people's consciousness seems to be changing. And I'm interested in why, but I'm just glad that people are starting to kind of break through some of these really classically held lies. And that's a shift that we're all watching, And so I'm glad to be part of it because I think people like us have been, been driving these things for a long time. And I'm really glad to see it starting to break through. But I just hope people can recognize that even though it feels uncomfortable, that it feels like things are getting really crazy, that if we can really stand back and look at why, it's because positive change is happening, And I mean, at least that's what I believe. And I think that the governments are scrambling to try to maintain that control. It's an interesting time, So just keep a positive outlook out there and just, question everything as always, man. So thanks for having me on, brother.
Yeah, and you're right. I do feel like things are changing, and consciousness is completely open to new ideas and whatnot. And I think you're a big contributor to that. I mean, that you're one of those people that, if it's Sam, if it's myself, if it's Charlie, if it's so many people in the community, we always talk about, just amazing work that you've done, how consistently you put out amazing research, how you're always the first one to question things. And no matter how much it might be you even going against the grain of your own community, you don't mind asking those questions. So you don't just say the motto, but you live the motto of questioning everything, which we love. So thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much for all the hard work. I mean, you're probably one of the most banned, censored people out there, and that typically is a good sign for people in our community. That means that you're you're talking about the right things and you're questioning the
Mhm.
right things. So, and you put a lot on the line because of that. I mean, believe me, it'd be much easier for you to just say, hey, let me just be like louder with Crowder and just join a team and just defend that team no matter what.
Right.
And but instead you took the hard road because it's your morals and your compass is much more important than anything else.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that, man. I'm looking forward to the next time, and we'll do it again for sure. We should set it up right now. I'll
Yeah.
text you afterward.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Hey, happy Friday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend and thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, brother. See you next time.
Yeah.